Vontaze Burfict, obviously the guy
Yeah.
that came out of college. People talked to him about you weren't high on him coming out of college. How's he changed? How's he improved since the player you saw back then? How has he evolved to a?
Well, let's set the record straight, okay? The comment I made that a lot of people want to glom on was that I said Vontaze Burfict wouldn't get drafted, right? That was the comment that people wanted to talk about, and he didn't. Okay, it wasn't anything to do with his talent level. It's just that last year he played, he wasn't in good shape. He didn't have good tape. I think he'd probably acknowledge that now. So my entire evaluation was based on a really gifted and talented guy that didn't have a good year and still came out early. Okay, so now you flip forward to his NFL career, and a good friend of mine, Paul Gunther, literally became one of his best friends, earned his trust, showed him how to become an NFL player, and kind of unearthed the fact that on top of being this incredibly tough, physical guy, he was also smart and instinctive. So if you go back to tape early in his career, when he was in the Pro Bowl and playing well, when he was in shape, when he was healthy, when he had a period of time where that was all on the table, he was as good as any off-the-ball linebacker in football. Okay? So Paul had him for a long time. Paul knows this guy better than any of us. And Paul banged the table for him, hard. And I challenged him a little bit. He's getting older. He didn't have a great year last year, but there's still talent there, Paul. Is it, how are we dealing with this? And he's like, Mike, Paul was point blank. This guy will be in great shape. He'll come in with a chip on his shoulder. He loves our defense. He knows all our terminology. He can get us set up, our front set up, snap to snap. So, when your defense coordinator feels that strongly about something and it's a position of need and he's only 28 years old, let's go. So Vontaze Burfict is a Raider and I'm all in.
Still, obviously, there's still free agents out there left to sign, but as we move closer to the draft, even if we're talking numbers of defensive end / edge rushers are very low.
You want to kick some money in for us? Get one?
There isn't a lot to afford there to chip in for it, but I mean, does that really kind of hone in on draftable guys? The closer.
I've said before that I think in free agency you try to kind of take care of certain team needs, so that when the draft comes, you can have a better conviction about taking the best guy on that board. Now, there's common sense involved with that.
Right.
If two guys are ranked fairly close and one's a higher position of need, it's kind of obvious. If you're talking about two different levels of players sitting there when you're on the board, and one of them is a position of need, but he's significantly less, you can't do that. You dilute your talent level a little bit. So are we aware that we don't have many defensive ends? Trust me, Coach Gruden says to me every day, it's Arden Key and me. That's all we got. It's Arden Key and me. What are you going to do, Mike?
Were you guys in on Justin Houston, trying to bring him in?
No.
Mike, in free agency as it's gone on, has the uncertainty, I guess, it's official now, obviously. It looked like it was always going to be official that you're going back to Oakland, at least for this year.
Yeah.
Did free agents have questions about that you were talking to? Like, hey, where am I going to be calling home this next year, let alone going to Nevada?
Not really.
No,
not really. I think most people thought from a common sense perspective it was going to be a bus ride and not a plane ride to a home game. So I think that was really the distinction.
The way free agency went I'll include Antonio in that because of the way free agency went, and I'll include Antonio on that. The big contracts to a few guys, would that have surprised you in terms of the investments that you guys made at the number of investments at the price at which you did?
I think a little bit on both sides of it, Mike. I think when AB came into the picture, it wasn't something we necessarily planned for, right? I thought somebody give him a first-round pick, and we weren't willing to give up one of our three. So when the Buffalo deal fell through and all of a sudden we had an opportunity to make a play for him, John and I were 100% in agreement that at the right price we had to go do it. He's a game changer. He's one of 2 or 3 offensive players in the league you have to game plan for every week. I'm talking about non-quarterbacks. So we felt like it's something we had to do. Now it affected our dollars left for free agency, right? But it was a game changer. And we felt like he's still in the prime of his career, And we felt like our interests were aligned with his interest. He's going to have a little chip on his shoulder, want to show everybody how good he is. And we're all in on that, obviously, right? So now we've got a little bit less money for the rest of free agency, but we had some needs we really wanted to address. And we wanted to address them not with 15 smaller contracts, but with players that have already gotten to a certain level in the league, and we felt were like young enough and had enough of a passion for the game to make a difference. So Coach Gruden's obviously big on protecting his quarterback, and so the Trent Brown thing came up, right? And we had to make a decision. How aggressive do we want to be? And obviously we went in hard early, knowing that he was going to have a big market, but also knowing that he's 25 years old. He's been really well coached by Dante Scarnecchia in New England, and we need to continue that with Tom Cable in Oakland. But we're betting on his upside. We believe in him. And then everything else we did, you know, believe it or not, I mean, Tyrell Williams wanted to come play for us. When AB got there, Tyrell and his agent were kind of like, he wants to play for Gruden and he wants to play with AB. He wants to stay on the West Coast, so things aligned. And that came together when we didn't think it would after we signed AB. You know, LaMarcus Joyner, man, I've been a fan of that kid since Florida State. And he plays with a passion that, and I'm going on way too long here, I apologize, but I mean, the dude plays with a passion. He loves the game. You sit down and talk to LaMarcus Joyner, he can break down all 11 guys on defense. When we talk about a passion and a love for the game, he has it. So we kind of feel like we made a difference at several key positions, and we think it's going to help us in the draft. And hopefully it complements the strengths of the draft also.
Does that go back then to your comment at the Senior Bowl where you said the more you do in free agency, the more surgical you can be in the draft?
Yeah, I think, and again, you know, what do I know? I'm a first-time GM, so I've just watched a lot of guys for a lot of years, you know, and I think when you solve needs at a certain level in free agency, okay, it doesn't have to be all pro, it can be solid starter, it can even be rotational backup, but when you fill needs, it makes you less panicked about what you have to do in the draft process. So again, the term surgical just means we got to get the best football player for our team. That's all.
Do you anticipate some shuffling on the offensive line, given there's no more Kalechi? Maybe is there a possibility that Gabe moves to the left or Colt moves to the right? Have you thought about how that's going to work out?
Yeah, but you're going to have to talk to John about that. I think
Okay.
John's still working it through. I mean, we signed a tackle that can play both sides, which is really exciting to us. His tape in San Francisco, right tackle, is pretty good. So we feel like we have a guy that can play both sides. Colton can play both sides, and what it allows us to do, obviously, is make our third-round pick, Brandon Parker, a swing guy this year, which will really help his development. So we feel good about the tackles. Obviously, our center is an all-pro type center. Gabe is an all-pro type guard, and the question is just, I think, how we work the interior of that line.
Anything new with Marshawn?
No, I think John's talked to him a couple times. I have not. John has a relationship with him. I don't. You know, ultimately, there's obviously a big question mark at running back with us right now, and he's a guy that I think both parties just kind of have to wait until the draft and see what happens there.
If you mentioned the aggression with the Trent Brown deal, the NFL Network started a program at 9 a.m. Before the first commercial break came, you reportedly agreed to terms. How did that happen? Like, how did the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history come to agreement so quickly? How did that? What was developing there?
Well, Tom Delaney's our chief salary cap guy, and I will tell you this about Tom and his department. I think they're on the cutting edge on all the data. I mean, you walk in our free agency room and what they can put up on 3 different screens as far as the history of players, what they've gotten, how they've gotten it, who the comps are for every player out there, and kind of predict within a small percentage of where they think a deal is going to happen, right? And we did this with all our top guys, and certainly did it with Trent. And I think we were kind of buttoned up and knew that when the clock struck 9, we were going to be on the phone with Drew, and we were going to try to blow them out of the water. We knew there'd be competition. We knew what we thought his market was going to be, and we were going to go in with an offer that we thought was slightly above his market, and we did. And to Drew's credit, he recognized the market. We tweaked a few things, and the deal was done.
way that it's structured, where 2020, from a cash flow standpoint, we talked about the 2020 Nevada implications. Is that your guys' design, or is that Rosenhaus's?
I think safe to say, without getting into individual contracts, but all the agents were concerned about trying to push some money back into Nevada if possible.
What's the biggest thing you get out of going to pro days? When you talk to guys, we see them on film about the combine, but what are you looking for at a pro day, like from a guy like Josh Allen or Quinn Williams? Or,
See, my wife teases me. She says I like to smell the grass, and she's right. I do. I'm a coach's son that feels better when I'm on the grass, and I like seeing kids in different environments. I like seeing them at the combine, how they act, how they interact. Love seeing them at all-star games, how they treat with their coaches. You know, I mean, just to give you an example, the Cabinda, the Mike linebacker Cabinda that's in Oakland, last year Paul Gunther was asking me about Mike linebackers that were kind of down the line guys. I said, man, I was at the East-West game, and this Cabinda kid, after every series in practice, would come off the field and go right to the defensive coordinator and say, okay, because I stood behind the defensive coordinator on the field. When they come out in this formation and they cross motion changing strength, we didn't go over that in our meetings last night. What do you want me to check to? I'm like, wow, right? Think about that. Here's a guy lining people up and a step ahead with the coaches trying to get it all done. And I just filed that away. It was in my notes. And when Paul Gunther asked me about it last year, like, who's a guy? Right away, I was like, Cabinda's a guy. You know, so that's an example of what you can see in different arenas. And when I'm at a pro day, these guys are interacting with different people. Sometimes, like, I met with some of the guys at Alabama and Kentucky because I got there a day early. I spent some time watching film with them, sitting down, putting the tape on, asking them questions, getting to know them better about their families, who might be coming with them if Oakland drafted them. You know, I just think the deeper you get into figuring the kid out, the better judge of character you'll be throughout his tenure.
Was there an advantage to seeing Williams and then going to Ohio State for Bosa and then with Josh all in a close proximity that you could really kind of...
And none of them worked out,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So you would go, why the hell would you even go there?
But there's still a lot to
But
learn about them.
Yeah, and you guys all kind of get focused in on the first round picks and stuff, and a tangible thing for me at the pro days are the down the line guys. You know, they're the ones working out. So you guys want to focus in on Bosa and Quinn Williams and Josh Allen, and I understand that. But they didn't even work out. I spent some time with all of them off the field. But for me, I want to see these other guys work out. I want to meet with some of these down the road. You know, I want to meet with the 5th round safety or the 6th round safety or what. You know, those are guys you want to learn more about. The draft isn't over on day 3. You know.
How do you recruit for undrafted rookies? Because we talk a lot about all the picks that you guys have, and you could have more, you could have fewer based on trade maneuvers.
Right.
But what happens afterward it's wide open. These guys can sign with anybody to make sure that they want to sign with the Raiders.
It's a good question, and I've talked to a lot of people around the league the last few years about it. You know, what's the best way to? There's so many of them, and there's so many different grades on all these kids, and you have a finite amount of money to spend on them. And I think the right thing to do is we've got our coaches going to a lot of pro days and trying to establish relationships with guys that may not get drafted, may or may not. You know, they're on the bubble, 5th, 6th, 7th round. A 5th rounder in Oakland might be a priority free agent pick it in Dallas, right? So our coaches are on the road, our scouts are on the road, and we're trying to continue to develop relationships and show them that Oakland's a place where they'll have a choice or a chance, regardless of what round or even if they're undrafted. They're going to have a chance in Oakland. We're young. We're coming off 4-12. You know, you've got an opportunity to come in and play early with us. You've got an opportunity to make a team. You want to play special teams, you've got an opportunity. You've got the best special teams coach in football, Rich Bisaccia. Come play for him. You know, so we're selling all that kind of stuff. And I think the relationships are important. And as we get closer and closer, I think we just have to stay in contact. You know, invite some of them to your 30 visits. Bring those kids in, love them up a little bit. You know, watch them, film with them, show them the GM cares, the head coach cares, position coach cares. Just common sense stuff.
Fans get fired up when they see Derek and Antonio Brown working out in the field. I'm
Yeah.
sure you also probably get a charge out of that when you see them.
Yeah, you kidding?
Yeah.
I mean, I love I mean, I'm not even on social media. What's he on? Instagram? Is that what he does? My wife shows me stuff, and I just start laughing. I get fired up when I see him fired up, with our guys, whether it's in the facility or whether it's at Fresno. It's a really cool dynamic. Players kind of recognize talent, and Tyrell Williams wants to come play with him. Derek Carr can't wait to throw with him. So the dynamic in our building changed a little bit, and it's been really fun watching him. I think the key, Vic, is our interests are aligned. He's got a chip on his shoulder. He wants to show everybody how good he is, and obviously we want the same thing, and we care and appreciate the fact that he's here. So I think it's a good match.
As a follow-up, so negative, I got a question, I guess. Week 17 last year, how much did that concern you with him not playing that game, and what did you do a deep dive into that? What happened that week in Pittsburgh, or not really?
I think I know enough about his history and background. I think if you, and I did do a pretty deep dive with some of the Pittsburgh people I know, but the point is, for the majority of his career, could you criticize him for wanting the football more? Sure, but tell me a great wide receiver that doesn't want the ball, right? So he's got some of that in him, but at the end of the day, he was a positive force in that building for a lot of years. Whatever happened last year happened. The way I look at it is the opposite. I look at it like I just said a moment ago. He's a little pissed off. He's got something to prove. I think he's going to come out and prove it in Oakland next year, and we're going to be the beneficiaries.
A month to go to the draft, Mike. How different is your life now from being, now that you're a GM for one team as opposed to being the GM for 32 teams for the NFL Network?
I'm at the Biltmore out here instead of the Iowa Pro Day, which I should be at.
But in terms of just juggling things and keeping, I guess, your sanity,
The major difference for me this year was just the addition of free agency. And even though I watched a ton of NFL tape because I did NFL games, right? So I was familiar with the players. It's a whole different conversation as far as evaluating, trying to come with a coaching staff, a scouting staff, and trying to come to a unified front on what you want to do in free agency, which takes away from the draft. So I've never been taken away from the draft before, and managing people, and there's some stuff that takes me away from my own personal tape watching, which bothers me. And every GM and head coach I've ever talked to has told me the same thing. Basically, once you get to that position, sometimes you lose what you did the best or what you love to do the most. So I don't get this. I've got to really understand that I need to get back in the office and start grinding the hell out of a bunch of tape for the 7th rounders, for the free agents, for everybody, not just for 24, 27, and 35.
You gonna do a public mock draft then, or that's
Yeah, when's
gone?
that coming?
I will give you Daniel Jeremiah's cell phone number, who, by the way, is doing a great job. He's awesome.
With free agency and things like that, is with cap and cash flow and all those types of things, it seems like, I guess my question is, how important was it and is it to maintain that financial flexibility down the line? Because if you look at a lot of the deals, you can get out from under them within 2 years to
Right.
maintain that freedom down the line. You guys you're spending some money, but you're not handcuffing yourselves 4 years down the road.
Yeah, and again, I think under Mark Bedane and Tom Delaney, Oakland's always done a nice job of, in all their major contracts, being out of the guaranteed phase after 2 years.
Right.
And that gives you, obviously, you're putting more money into the contract up front or guaranteeing more, but at the end of the day, it gives you flexibility, which I think in today's NFL world, one of the things you have to be in all aspects is nimble, whether it's financially, whether it's draft, whether it's free agency. You got to be nimble, and I think Delaney and Bedane and those guys are really good at that.
You and John have been pretty public expressing your support for Derek, calling him a franchise quarterback, your franchise quarterback, and everything along those lines. Yet there is belief among some that you guys could be going quarterback. You guys could be moving up for quarterback. You guys, if a quarterback falls early in the draft, round 1, you guys could do that. Do you like that in terms of the element of unpredictability that it seems you guys have going into this draft, where people think you might do pretty much anything at the spot of number 4?
I think people are inquisitive because we have three picks, You know, people want to know what we're going to do, especially up high at 4. So the way I would address this is the first piece of it in my head is, okay, Derek Carr is a franchise quarterback. I do believe that. We had Drew Lock at the Senior Bowl, potential first-round pick. We got to work with him for a week. We did our due diligence. We're going to see Kyler Murray, and we're going to see Haskins. And again, we believe they're high-level quarterbacks. And that's due diligence. You better know how good these guys are. You better know what other teams are interested in. You better know whether or not you can improve your own position. I mean, that's part of what a GM and a head coach do is evaluate every position on your football team, and you owe it to your team to do the best job you can to upgrade whenever you can. But again, I said this back at the Combine. I don't think there are very few people walking around that are better than Derek Carr.
Given the influence of the quarterback position, generally speaking, as an evaluator, is it advantageous to build a bigger book on potential franchise quarterbacks, guys you could be facing in game plan against for years to come, just so even if you don't go into a draft thinking we're going to get a quarterback, just to know while you have the opportunity as much as you can about a player?
Absolutely. I mean, information to me is gold, and it always will be. And John Gruden is a quarterback guy, right? We all know that John Gruden's a quarterback guy. So John's going to evaluate every quarterback out there every year, every single year. That's just who he is. As his partner in this thing, I got to be very aware of that, and I think it pays tangential results down the road. No matter where they go and what they do, we've watched every throw these guys have made. We feel like we know their strengths and weaknesses. We see them in a division game or a conference game or any game, we feel like we're going to have a leg up in that evaluation process to game plan against that kid. So all of it just plays into the whole due diligence conversation that we have in our building.
All right, guys, I got to move along, but one more question or two more questions, you guys.
A couple quick thoughts on the guys you recently signed, Riley and Lawson.
Nevin Lawson is a guy that I've liked since Utah State. I think he's really competitive. He can play inside and outside. I think he upgrades our cornerback room just because he's so darn competitive, and he's going to get in there and not really care who starts. He's going to go out and compete, and that's what we want. We want guys like that. I didn't hear the beginning of the question. Who was the other
Riley
one?
was like Riley. The last two guys you signed was
Curtis Riley.
Oh, Curtis. I'm sorry. I'm thinking offensive side. Curtis is a free safety that, again, gives us some versatility on the back end. So on the back end, now we've got Lawson. Awesome. We've got some other guys that can play. Obviously, Joyner, we signed him to be a nickel and a free safety. But when he's playing nickel, who starts at free safety? Where's Carl Joseph? Is he in the box at strong? Is he going to compete with Eric Harris? You know, so we think we've got more competition 2 weeks later than we did 2 weeks ago as far as on the back end, both inside and outside. And all those deals we had some competition in for getting those players, and I think they really recognize and hope that we're a young, upcoming, aggressive football team.
How do you like where you are at tight end, and also the opportunity that could be there to, even if you like where you are at tight end, possibly augment the position further?
I mean, tight end's a position we've got to be looking at. We lost one of the better ones in the league in free agency. So we lose a pass-catching target. We've got some guys on our roster we're intrigued with. We weren't able to address it in free agency thus far. So, you know, we've got to look at other free agents that are out there in the draft, or whether or not we just want to stay. You know, the draft is interesting because you don't know how it's going to play out. But it's a position that we're looking hard at, both at the draft and free agency.
Real quick, you mentioned not a lot of football happens here. That was your thoughts going into it. Now that you are here, in terms of potential trade discussions, you know, everyone's here in one place. Has there been some of that talk where you're presenting certain possibilities? Are those possibilities being presented to you regarding trades?
Yeah, well, a little bit. I don't think it's overt. I think it's still early, to be honest with you. And our team's kind of throwing some stuff out there just to initially start some conversations. I think they are. But I think a lot of it accelerates as you get closer to the draft. We're still a long way away.
As you think big picture, obviously John and you, I'm sure, want to win right now. Is that a struggle to balance both of those needs, the short and the long term, at the same time as you're trying to build this team, not just to win in September, but to win over a sustained stretch?
I think something that's atypical in today's NFL world is the length of John's contract. Okay?
Yeah.
And I think it gives us an advantage. I really do. And I think John and I can sit there and say, okay, what is the best move for the future of this franchise without the pressure of a coach worried about getting fired? And I think that means something.